There is a truth that has been kept from you, not by your circumstances, not by bad timing, but by something deliberate, something that required you to walk through certain valleys, carry certain silences, before you were ready to receive what I am about to say. God has been holding this back. Not out of cruelty, out of precision. Because truth spoken before its time lands like seed on hard ground, it cannot take root. But today, in this specific moment, that season of holding is over. The threshold has been crossed, and what has been withheld must now be spoken. You did not stumble upon this message. You were led here. Something invisible, something that does not make decisions, carelessly moved through the noise of your day and placed this exactly where you would find it. That is not coincidence. That is appointment. And the appointment tells you everything. You are ready. Whatever you have been carrying, the questions without answers, the prayers that felt like they fell short, the sense that something important was just out of reach, all of it has been preparing you for this moment. Stay with me, because what I am about to tell you will not just inform you. It will reorganize everything you thought you understood about your own story. Before I say another word, I need to ask something of you. Not much, just this. Wherever you are right now, whatever noise surrounds you, let it fall back. Let it exist without you for a few minutes. This message is not background content. It is not something to half hear while your mind is somewhere else. What is about to be said was held for a long time before it reached you, and it deserves the same attention. You would give a letter that had your name on it, one that had been waiting for years. So take a real breath. Not a polite one, a real one. Let your chest settle, let your shoulders drop, because what comes next is not something you need to chase. It is something you simply need to receive. There is a particular hour that comes to every chosen one. It usually arrives when the ordinary surface of life has gone quiet, late at night, when the house settles, or early in the morning before anyone else is awake, or in that strange suspended moment in the middle of the day, when nothing external demands your attention, and the deeper questions rise on their own. You know that hour. You have lived it many times. It is the hour when everything you have been carrying makes itself known. The questions you have been outrunning catch up with you. The wondering you push aside during daylight hours rises up and refuses to be dismissed. And in that hour, you have asked a version of the same question many different ways. Why does it feel like something true about me has not yet fully arrived? Why do I sense something larger at the edges of my life that I can never quite step into? Why, after everything I have walked through, does the most important part still feel just out of frame? Those are not small questions, and they are not symptoms of something broken in you. They are the sound of a truth trying to find its way to the surface. Yes, and that is exactly what we are going to walk through together today. But first, before we go anywhere deeper, I want to show you something about where you are right now, because I believe you have been experiencing a set of specific signs, things happening in your daily life, in your sleep, in your inner world, that most people have never had properly explained to them. And when these signs go unnamed, they get mislabeled. You call them anxiety. You call them exhaustion. You call them spiritual dryness, or sensitivity, or just being too much inside your own head. But that is not what they are. What they actually are is something far more important than any of those labels suggest. The first sign is a kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. You wake up after 7 or 8 hours, and the weariness is still there, not in your muscles, deeper than that. Somewhere in the bones, in the core of you, where rest does not seem to reach. You have described it to yourself in quiet moments as tired in a way that does not have a clear cause, tired in a way that no amount of sleep resolves. And you are right that it has no clear surface cause. But here is what is actually happening. Your spirit is processing weight that your conscious mind has not yet been given language for. When a chosen one is in a season of deep preparation, when something significant is being formed beneath the surface, the body registers it. The tiredness is not a malfunction. It is evidence of work being done at a level you cannot see. The second sign is emotional waves that arrive without warning. One moment you are fine, and then something shifts. A song, a sentence, a quiet moment alone, and the feeling comes. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is a strange, unlocated hope. Sometimes it is peace, followed by sadness, followed by something that almost resembles joy, all within the space of an hour, without any clear reason. And you have wondered if there is something wrong with you for feeling so much, when nothing in particular has happened. There is nothing wrong with you. Your frequency is shifting. The chosen one in transition does not feel one thing cleanly. They feel everything because they are standing at the edge of one season and the beginning of another, and both are present at once. The third sign is that your dreams have changed, more vivid, more textured, sometimes carrying something that feels prophetic in a way that is difficult to explain, but impossible to dismiss. You dream of places you have never been that feel oddly familiar. You dream of searching for something you cannot name. You wake with the sense that something important was communicated, but you cannot hold all of it. Your spirit receives while you rest. And in seasons of deep formation, the receiving accelerates. The dreams are not noise, they are signal. The fourth sign is smaller and more ordinary, but equally unmistakable. Repeating numbers. A song that comes on in the exact moment you needed it. A conversation you overhear that seems to answer a question you were holding privately. A phrase that finds you 3 times in a single day from 3 completely unrelated sources. Heaven is using the language of your ordinary life to speak to you. These things are not random. They are targeted. The fifth sign is that your tolerance has changed. Spaces and conversations that used to feel fine now leave you drained. People whose energy once felt neutral now feel like static. And you have wondered if you are becoming difficult, or closed off, or spiritually arrogant. You are not becoming difficult, you are becoming discerning. The chosen one who is rising cannot operate at the same frequency as everything around them. What you are feeling is not pride. It is alignment in progress. And the sixth sign is the most important one and the hardest to name. It is a knowing that lives underneath all the questions. Something that persists even in seasons when you have talked yourself out of it, when disappointment tried to erase it, when years of waiting made it seem like self-deception. Something that will not leave. Something that says, quietly and without drama, there is more. There is more to your story than what has been visible. There is more to who you are than what you have been able to show the world. There is more coming than anything you have yet received. That knowing is not wishful thinking. It is not a coping mechanism. It is not your mind creating comfort in the absence of evidence. It is the earliest arrival of a truth that is about to be spoken in full. Now, before I go any further, I want to tell you what is in this message if you stay until the end. You are going to receive the answer to why you have felt this way. Not a vague answer, a specific one. You are going to understand what has actually been happening in the seasons that looked like silence. You are going to leave with your real identity, the one that has been forming beneath the surface, spoken over you with clarity and with weight. And at the very end of this message, there is a ceremony, a declaration spoken over your life that I believe is the reason this entire message exists. Stay for that. Everything we walk through is leading there. Now, if you recognized yourself in even one of those 6 signs, and I believe you recognized yourself in more than one, then I need to tell you something important, something that changes what those signs mean. Because the question is not simply, Am I experiencing these things? The question is, what do they point toward? What truth are they the outer edge of? And the answer to that question is what most teachers in this space never reach. Not because they are withholding it, but because reaching it requires walking through something first. Here is the first truth that God can no longer keep hidden. You have never been confused. Not in the way you have labeled it. What you have been calling confusion, that inability to fully land in the ordinary, that sense of being slightly misaligned with the rooms and conversations and timelines around you, that is not disorder. That is not a sign that something went wrong in your formation. That is a function, a specific, deliberate, God-given function. You were built to sense what others cannot sense. You were built to receive signal that most people around you do not have the frequency to receive. And the reason the sensing has been uncomfortable, the reason it has felt like something you needed to manage or silence or apologize for, is that no one ever told you what it actually was. So, you called it anxiety. You called it overthinking. You called it being too sensitive, too intense, too much. And the world agreed with those labels, because the world does not have a category for a chosen one operating at the frequency they were designed for. But God does. There is a word in the original Hebrew language, a word that sits at the very root of the concept of revelation, and that word is Galah. And here is what makes this word remarkable. On the surface, Galah means to uncover, to reveal, to bring what was hidden out into the light, but that is not all it means. The same root word, the exact same letters, the exact same sound, also means to go into exile, to be taken from the familiar, to be displaced from what felt like home. And when you understand that, something shifts, because what it is telling you is this: God's revealing the process by which He brings a hidden truth into its full expression almost always begins with displacement. The moment you felt most exiled from the life you expected, most cut off from the familiar, most taken from what you thought was yours, that was not the moment before the revealing began. That was the revealing beginning. It is like being evacuated from a building before you can see the renovation happening on the inside. From outside, it looks like loss. From inside the plan, it is the necessary first step. Think of Joseph, a young man with a dream clear, vivid, God-given, about who he was and where he was going. And then everything that was supposed to confirm that dream seemed to directly contradict it. The pit, the betrayal, the prison, years in the dark, without a single visible sign that the dream was still alive. He did not know the shape of the tree while he was in the dark of the seed. The knowing came before the seeing, and the gap between the knowing and the seeing, that painful, disorienting gap, was not punishment. It was preparation. And I hear the Father saying something over you right now. What you have been sensing is real. I did not give you eyes that see nothing. What felt like confusion was always clarity. Clarity that arrived before its confirmation, sensing that came before the visible evidence. You were never broken. You were early. Truth is like a seed. It goes underground before it ever goes upward. The part of a seed's life that is invisible, buried in the dark, with no external evidence of what it is becoming, is not the absence of growth. It is the most essential growth. Without that underground season, there is no tree, there is no height, there is no fruit. You have been in the underground season, and underground is not where seeds stay. But if this is true, if what you have been sensing is real, if the displacement was the beginning of the revealing, then a harder question demands an answer. Why did it take this long? Why was it kept hidden at all? Why couldn't the truth simply arrive when you first needed it, instead of making you wait through every season that felt like it might break you? That question has an answer, and the answer will change the way you see every painful season you have ever walked through. The question I left you with was this: why was it kept hidden at all? Why couldn't the truth simply arrive earlier in the years, when you were desperate for it, in the seasons when having it might have changed everything? I want to answer that now. And I want to answer it honestly, not just comfortingly. Because the real answer is more precise than simply saying God's timing is perfect, even though that is true. It is more specific than saying you were not ready, even though that is also true. Here is the precise answer. The truth could not arrive before you arrived at the version of yourself capable of carrying it without destroying it. Let that settle for a moment. The truth could not arrive before you were capable of carrying it without destroying it. Because there is something about a genuine, deep, paradigm-shifting revelation about who you are, something about receiving the full weight of a calling that requires a certain interior architecture before it can be held safely. Not because the truth is fragile, but because people are. A chosen one who receives the full scope of their assignment before their character is built to match it will either collapse under it or misuse it, and neither of those serves what the truth was always meant to accomplish. So the hidden season was not about keeping the truth from you. It was about building you up to the size of the truth. And here is what was being built: 3 things. 3 specific things that can only be formed in hiddenness. Things that cannot be developed under observation, cannot be sped up by willpower, cannot be borrowed from anyone else. The first is character that is not performance. When there is no audience, when no one is watching, when no approval is available, and no validation is coming, who you are in that space is who you actually are. The hidden season strips everything that was constructed for external eyes. What survives is the real you. The version of you that does not practice goodness or faith or resilience because someone might notice. The version that simply is those things because the season demanded them and there was no other option. That kind of character is the only kind that can carry a real calling without eventually cracking under the weight of being seen. The second is discernment that is not borrowed. When there is no mentor to defer to, no community to validate your instincts, no clear voice confirming what is right, you are forced to develop your own inner compass. You are forced to learn the difference between what God is actually saying and what fear is manufacturing in the silence. That kind of discernment cannot be downloaded. It cannot be given in a single conversation. It develops through months and years of making decisions with incomplete information and learning slowly, and sometimes painfully, which inner voice to trust. The third is faith that is not dependent on visible evidence. This is the hardest one, because anyone can have faith when things are moving and confirmations are arriving, and life is producing proof that the calling is real. The faith that actually holds the faith that becomes unshakable is the kind that stands in the complete absence of visible evidence. The wilderness builds that faith precisely because it provides nothing external to lean on. You either learn to stand on what you cannot see, or you do not stand at all. And a chosen one with that kind of faith cannot be moved by setbacks because they stopped requiring external confirmation years ago. Just because it was quiet does not mean nothing was happening. Just because nothing moved on the surface does not mean nothing moved in the deep. Just because you could not see it does not mean it was not being done. Just because no one confirmed it does not mean it was not real. Just because the season was long does not mean the season was wrong. God does not waste seasons. He builds in them. And alongside the building, there was a stripping. Something had to be removed before the real you could emerge. And I want to be careful here, because this is the part that most people misunderstand. What was stripped was not your gifts, not your calling, not your purpose. What was removed was the version of you that had been constructed around other people's expectations, around labels that were placed on you before you were old enough to reject them, around versions of success and identity that were never actually yours to begin with. That is not loss. That is excavation. An archaeologist does not destroy the artifact by brushing away the layers of dirt. They reveal it. What looked like the season taking things from you was the season uncovering you. The version of you that exists beneath the expectations, beneath the labels, beneath the performance, that is the version that is being raised to the surface right now. And I want to say something honest about how that process felt. It hurt. I am not going to pretend otherwise. When things are stripped away, even things that were never truly yours, the stripping feels like loss. It can feel like failure. It can feel like God is taking instead of giving. And in those moments, the temptation is to reach back for what was being removed, to hold on to the smaller version of yourself because it felt safer, even if it was not true. Let it go. All of it. The labels, the expectations, the version of your story that required everyone else to understand it before it could be real. Let it go, because what is being revealed in its place is the actual thing. And the actual thing does not need the same protection the smaller version did. There is something in the natural world that mirrors this process with an accuracy that still stops me when I think about it. The caterpillar inside the chrysalis. Most people look at the chrysalis as a waiting period, a dormant pause between one form and another. But that is not what is happening inside. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar does not simply grow wings, it dissolves completely. The cells of the caterpillar's body actually break down into what scientists describe as a kind of soup, a substance that is neither what it was, nor yet what it is becoming, just the raw material of transformation in progress. If you opened a chrysalis at the midpoint, you would find nothing recognizable, nothing that looks like what went in, nothing that looks like what is coming out, just the active, invisible, completely disorienting work of becoming. There were seasons when you felt like you were dissolving, when nothing in you was recognizable, not to yourself, not to the people who knew you before. When you felt like neither the person you used to be, nor the person you were becoming, just something in between without a name for what it was. That was not falling apart. That was the chrysalis. That was the most active season of your transformation, disguised as the most chaotic and formless. And what emerges from the chrysalis is not a better version of what went in. It is an entirely different creature, operating at an entirely different level, built for a world that the caterpillar never could have navigated. The seed does not know it is a tree. It only knows it is going deeper. Every inch that the root pushes further into dark ground looks, from the outside, like nothing, like being left behind, while other things rise in visible, measurable ways. The seed sees none of that. It only knows the dark and the direction it is being pushed. But the going deeper is the going upward, just not yet. The root system must be deeper than the tree will be tall, or the first real storm takes it down. The season of going deeper, the season that felt like going backwards, the season where everyone else seemed to be rising, while you were sinking, that season was building what you are about to stand on. I want you to hold everything I just told you for a moment, because it is true, and it matters, and it is part of what God has been holding to reveal to you in this season. But it is not the deepest part. There is something I have not told you yet, something that makes the length of the hidden season make sense, in a way that will bring things into alignment that have been out of alignment for a very long time. And it goes one level deeper than what we have covered so far. The question is not only why the truth was hidden, the question is, what was it hidden from? What specific force required that level of protection? What was operating against this truth in a way that made the hiddenness not just wise but essential? That is what comes next. And when you see it clearly, you will understand not just the season, but the strategy. Not just the reason, but the architect behind the reason. Stay with me for that. But before we get there, I want to plant something in your mind. Just the beginning of an idea that I will return to later, because it connects to everything we are about to walk through. There is a field of science that studies what happens to the human brain in exactly the kind of seasons we have been describing. Seasons of deep formation, seasons of internal reconstruction. And what researchers at some of the leading institutions in the world have discovered is that this kind of transformation, the kind that happens in the hidden season, in the dissolution, in the going deeper, has a specific neurological signature, a specific frequency that the brain enters when it is being rebuilt at its deepest level. And what has been found about how to deliberately access that frequency, how to step into it intentionally, not just wait for circumstances to force. It is something I believe is directly relevant to where you are going. I will come back to it before this message is over. For now, hold that thought. A frequency, a state that your brain was built to enter, a way back into what was placed in you before the world began to quiet it. What was the truth hidden from? The answer to that changes everything that comes after it. What the truth was hidden from is not a person. It is not an enemy outside of you. It is not a circumstance working against you in the visible world. What the truth was hidden from is something that used to live inside you. A version of your own mind that, had it received this revelation too early, would have taken it apart before it could take root. The doubt that had not yet been identified. The fear that had not yet been understood for what it actually was. The unformed version of you that would have received a truth about your identity and either collapsed under it or misused it before the character to carry it was built. God's concealment was not punishment, it was protection. Precise, intentional, surgical protection. And the proof of that is in the pattern. Because when you look at every major life that carried real weight, every calling that left a mark that outlasted the person who carried it, you find the same structure. Moses knew at 40 years old that he was meant to be a deliverer. He felt it with such certainty that he acted on it before the formation was complete, and the consequence sent him into the wilderness for 40 years. Not as punishment, as graduate school. The wilderness did not take 40 years because God was angry. It took 40 years because what needed to be formed in Moses, the complete surrender of his own strength, the patience that has no bottom, the humility that does not perform itself, required every single one of those days. When he finally stepped into the assignment, he was not the man who rushed ahead at 40. He was the man the assignment had always required. The delay was the design. David was anointed king at 8 years old. Oil poured over the head of a shepherd boy, a declaration made, a future spoken, and then he went back to the sheep for years. The gap between the anointing and the visible throne stretched on and on, without any movement that anyone could see. What was happening in that gap? The king that Israel needed was not the boy standing in the field the day Samuel arrived. It was the man forged by everything that came after. Every lion fought in the dark. Every bear defeated, with no audience watching. Every night in an open field, with nothing but the stars, and his own voice, and the God who was listening. That was the curriculum. The invisible years were not a pause. They were the preparation for the throne. And Esther, hidden, unknown, placed in a position that looked like nothing, a young woman, far from the rooms where decisions were made, far from the visible corridors of power, waiting without knowing what she was waiting for, until the exact moment when the hiddenness itself was what qualified her, when being positioned in the unseen was the only thing that could save what needed to be saved. The concealment was the strategy. The fact that you have been in the hidden season, that your gifts have not yet been fully recognized, that your calling has not yet been publicly confirmed, that what you carry has not yet arrived in its full visible form is not random. That is not coincidence. That is not accident. The fact that you have survived every season that should have broken you, and you are still here, and you are still reaching for the truth, is not random. That is not coincidence. That is not accident. The fact that what was placed inside you is still alive after everything that tried to silence it, still present, still pressing against the surface, still refusing to be buried permanently, is not random. That is not coincidence. That is not accident. The fact that you are here, in this moment, with enough of the signal still intact to receive what is being spoken, is not random. That is not coincidence. That is not accident. God does not hide what he intends to reveal forever. He holds it with precision until the moment of maximum impact, until the carrier is ready, until the ground is prepared, until the truth can land without being immediately dismantled by the part of you that was not yet strong enough to hold it. But I want to name something now that has made the hidden season harder than it needed to be, because it was not the wilderness itself that created the most damage. It was something the wilderness produced, a voice inside you that has been working against this truth long before you had language for what it was doing. That voice is doubt, and I want to address it carefully, because how most chosen ones understand
you.